Octavia Bren's coat was still on the hook by the front door when her mother-in-law told her to leave. Not quietly, not privately. In front of the entire family, Harrington cousins arranged along the living room sectional. Two of Wesley's college friends standing near the kitchen island with drinks in their hands, and Wesley himself seated at the head of the dining table, like he hadn't just watched his mother point at Octavia and say, "We don't need you here anymore. You were never really one of us." Octavia, 36 years old, had been married to Wesley Harrington for 4 years. She had learned his mother's coffee order. She had driven his father to a cardiology appointment at 6 in the morning. Because Wesley had a pitch meeting he couldn't reschedule. She had smiled through 4 Thanksgivings, 3 Christmases, and a family reunion in Hilton Head where his Aunt Dolores had asked her twice whether she worked in retail or something. She had smiled through all of it. She didn't smile now. She took her coat off the hook, she folded it over her arm, and she walked out without saying a word because there was nothing left to say to people who had already decided who she was. What the Harrington family didn't know, what Wesley himself didn't know, because Octavia had never told him, and he had never thought to ask, was that the building they were standing in was hers. The Harrington Family Medical Group, 3 regional hospitals, and a network of outpatient clinics stretching across 4 states, operated under a holding company that Octavia had acquired quietly through a series of transactions that her legal team had structured specifically to avoid attention. She was not the face of Harrington Health Partners. She had never wanted to be the face of anything. She was the majority stakeholder, the woman whose signature sat at the bottom of the restructuring agreement that had kept the Harrington name in operation 7 years ago. When the family patriarch, Gordon Harrington, had run the group into the ground with a construction expansion that made no financial sense and 2 malpractice settlements that nearly broke them. Gordon had sold a controlling interest to an investment consortium. He had never known who sat at the top of that consortium. He still didn't know. Neither did Wesley. Octavia had fallen in love with Wesley before any of it. That was the part people would find hard to believe later when everything came out. She had met him at a fundraiser for a children's literacy nonprofit in Atlanta. He had been funny and a little nervous, and he had spilled red wine on her dress and apologized for 11 minutes straight before she finally told him to stop. She had genuinely liked him. She had married him believing that it was enough. It wasn't enough, but that wasn't because of the money. That part was complicated in ways she was still untangling. The morning after the Harrington family dinner, Wesley came to the apartment they shared in Midtown and set a manila envelope on the kitchen counter. He did not look at her when he did it. "I think we both know this isn't working," he said. Octavia looked at the envelope. "You want a divorce. I think it's better for both of us. Is this because of what your mother said last night?" "It's because of a lot of things, Octavia." She noticed he didn't deny it. She picked up the envelope. Inside was a separation agreement that a lawyer had already prepared, which meant Wesley had been thinking about this for longer than last night. The agreement was neat. It was tidy. It offered her what any reasonable person would call a generous settlement, a lump sum, the Atlanta apartment, continued health insurance for 24 months. He had no idea what he was signing away. "I'll need time to review this," she said. "Of course." He seemed relieved that she wasn't crying. "Take whatever time you need." She put the envelope in her bag and made herself coffee and stood at the window looking out at the city for a long time after he left. She was not going to cry. Not because she wasn't sad. She was sad, in a specific, exhausted way that had been building for years, but because crying felt like a response to something that had been done to her, and she was no longer willing to position herself as someone that things were done to. She called her attorney, a woman named Royce, who had been handling Octavia's affairs for 11 years, and who, upon hearing the situation, said simply, "How do you want to handle it?" "Carefully," Octavia said. "And correctly. Then we let it play out." We let it play out. What Octavia had not told Wesley, and what Wesley had never thought to investigate, was the specific architecture of how she had come to own what she owned. Octavia had grown up in Columbus, Ohio, the only child of a woman who cleaned houses for a living, and a father who had died when she was 9. She had worked 3 jobs through college. She had a finance degree from Ohio State and an MBA from Chicago Booth that she had paid for herself through a combination of scholarships, night shifts, and the kind of sustained, precise ambition that looks to outsiders like luck. She had built her first company at 27, a healthcare data analytics firm, and sold it at 31 for more money than she had previously been able to imagine. She had used that capital carefully, quietly, and without any appetite for recognition. She did not have a social media presence beyond a sparse LinkedIn profile that listed 2 of her 7 board seats. She did not give interviews. She had never been photographed at an industry event that would connect her name to her holdings. She had met Wesley 6 months after the Harrington acquisition. She had signed the agreement that saved his family's company on a Tuesday in November in a conference room in Chicago. And she had met him the following Saturday at a gala in Atlanta, and the coincidence of that timeline had never struck her as something she needed to disclose. Looking back, she could see how that had been a mistake. Not a moral one, she thought. She had not deceived him. She had simply not volunteered information that was not his to have, but it had created a gap that had widened over 4 years into something neither of them could cross. The Harrington family, meanwhile, had no idea anything was coming. Wesley's mother, Lenora Harrington, 62, was a woman who organized the world according to a social hierarchy she had constructed sometime in the mid-1980s and had not meaningfully updated since. She had opposed Octavia from the beginning, too quiet. She had told Wesley too contained, not the kind of woman who would fit into the family, which was a way of saying that Octavia had not grown up with money and Lenora could tell. Lenora could always tell. Wesley's father, Gordon, 70, had lost the family business and knew it, and had spent 7 years rebuilding his sense of importance around the fiction that the consortium that had rescued them had done so because of the Harrington name's intrinsic value. He held a ceremonial chairman position. He attended quarterly board meetings. He was given reports that were accurate in their details and carefully managed in their framing. Wesley himself ran the group's regional development division and was paid well for it, and believed that his role was essential, which it was, but only within a structure that someone else had built and that someone else ultimately controlled. None of them knew that the woman Lenora had pointed at and told to leave was the reason the Harrington name still meant anything. Octavia spent 3 weeks reviewing the separation agreement. She made no changes to it. She did not contact a divorce attorney of her own. She signed the document exactly as it had been prepared on a Wednesday afternoon in her office on the 14th floor of a building in Buckhead that she also owned. She sent the signed agreement back to Wesley's attorney with a single accompanying note. Please advise your client that I will be exercising my rights as majority stakeholder in Harrington Health Partners to call a board review, effective immediately. This is unrelated to the personal matter and is a governance decision that has been pending for some time. She had told Royce about this plan 3 weeks earlier. Is this retaliation? Royce had asked, not accusatorially, just to understand the framing. No, Octavia said. It's overdue. I've been watching the regional development numbers for 2 years. The division is over-leveraged, and the person running it has been making expansion decisions without adequate financial modeling. I would have addressed it regardless. The timing is unfortunate, or convenient, Royce said. Or accurate, Octavia said. The board review was scheduled for the second Thursday of the following month. Wesley did not know about it until 4 days before, when the notice arrived through official channels and his assistant, visibly unsettled, brought it to him in a printed email and stood there while he read it. Wesley read the document twice, then he called his father. Gordon arrived at Wesley's office within the hour. He was a tall man who moved with the particular confidence of someone who had spent a long time being the most important person in most rooms, and he stood at the window looking out at the Atlanta skyline and said, "The consortium is asserting governance rights. Someone is making a move." "Who?" Wesley asked. "I don't know yet. I'll find out." He didn't find out in time. That was the thing about how Octavia had structured her holdings. There were layers, and the layers were legal, and unwinding them took time that Gordon did not have, and resources that the Harrington, despite their self-image, did not actually possess in the way they thought. The board meeting happened on a Thursday morning in a conference room, in a building that the Harrington family had always used and had always thought of as theirs. Octavia arrived 7 minutes early. She was wearing a charcoal blazer and no jewelry other than small gold earrings that had belonged to her mother. She had a bottle of water and a leather portfolio, and she sat down at the seat that corresponded to her stake in the company and waited. Gordon arrived and saw her and did not immediately understand what he was seeing. He had met Octavia at Wesley's wedding. He had shaken her hand at 2 holiday parties. He had never connected her face to the name on the documents. He said, "What are you doing here?" "I called the meeting, Gordon," Octavia said. The room was quiet in the way that rooms get quiet when something is happening that cannot be undone. Wesley was not at the board meeting. He was not a board member. His role in regional development did not give him standing to attend. He heard about what happened from 3 different people over the course of the same afternoon, each account slightly different in its details, but identical in its essential fact. His wife, his soon-to-be ex-wife, owned a majority stake in his family's company, had owned it for 7 years. had been the silent force behind the restructuring that had allowed the Harrington name to survive. He called Octavia that evening. She let it go to voicemail. He called again. She answered on the third call, not because she felt she owed him an explanation, but because she had decided, somewhere in the previous weeks, that she would not be the kind of person who avoided things. "Is it true?" he asked. "Yes." A long silence. She could hear him breathing. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it was none of your family's business who held their debt," she said. "And then it became complicated." "Complicated?" Octavia Westley. "You want to ask me if I used this to hurt your family?" "I didn't. The board review was something I should have initiated 18 months ago. The Regional Development Division has been operating outside its risk parameters. That's documented, and it exists independently of anything personal between us." "My father." "Your father will retain his ceremonial role if he chooses to. That hasn't changed. What will change is the financial oversight structure and the approval process for capital expenditure above a certain threshold. I've sent a summary to the board." Another silence. "And my job?" Westley asked. His voice was different now, smaller. Octavia paused before answering, not for effect, but because she wanted to say this correctly. "I have recommended to the board that an external review of the Regional Development Division be conducted by an independent firm. Based on that review, the board will determine the appropriate structure going forward, including personnel. I have explicitly told the board that I will not be making personnel recommendations for any role that my personal relationship creates a conflict of interest around." "So you're letting them decide?" "I'm letting them do their job." She heard him set something down. A glass, maybe. Something ceramic. "I didn't know," he finally said. "I know you didn't. Does that matter to you at all?" She thought about the 4 years, the dinners where she had been invisible. The way his mother had never once asked her a question about her life. The way Westley himself had never thought to ask what she actually did all day, had accepted her vague answers about consulting work and asset management without curiosity, without interest, without any real desire to know her. "It matters," she said. "It just doesn't change anything." She hung up. She sat in the quiet of her office for a moment, looking at the city. Then she opened her laptop and went back to work. The board completed their independent review over the following 6 weeks. The Regional Development Division was restructured. 3 senior roles were eliminated. Westley was offered a reduced position in a different division with a title that no one who knew him would consider a step forward. He did not take it. He resigned by email on a Friday afternoon, and the email was formal and brief and said nothing about his personal circumstances. Gordon Harrington issued a statement about his plans to transition into a more advisory capacity, which was a way of saying that his ceremonial chairman role had been made more ceremonially than before. He had lost the ability to affect outcomes. He had retained the title. Whether that was enough for a man like Gordon was a question that Octavia did not think about for long. Lenora Harrington said nothing publicly. Privately, according to Westley's cousin Brina, who had always privately liked Octavia and sent her a text message that read only, "I'm sorry they never deserved you." Lenora had spent several days in a state of rigid, furious disbelief that the woman she had dismissed and diminished, and finally told to leave, had been the author of their financial survival. The separation was finalized on a Tuesday in February. The apartment was already transferred. The lump sum had already cleared. Octavia had not sought anything beyond what the original agreement specified, because she had not wanted anything beyond what was fair. She was in the Columbus airport on a layover when the finalization went through. She was eating a sandwich at a Gate C cafe, watching planes move in the grey winterlight outside the window. Her phone buzzed with the email from Royce. She read it once, then set the phone face down on the table. She thought about her mother, who had cleaned houses her whole working life and had never complained about it. Not once, not in any way that Octavia had been able to detect. Who had told her, when Octavia was in high school and frustrated about something she couldn't even remember now, "People will underestimate you your whole life. You don't have to correct them, you just have to outlast them." She had outlasted them. She wasn't sure if that was wisdom or survival, or some combination that didn't have a cleaner name. Her gate began boarding. She gathered her bag, and her coffee, and her coat, and she walked toward the jetway, and she didn't look back. The Harrington name survived. The hospitals were still operating. The staff still had their jobs, their benefits, their pensions intact. That had been the first thing Octavia had confirmed with the board, before any of the structural questions, before the personnel review. Nobody who had nothing to do with the Harrington family's decisions would be harmed by the correction of those decisions. The board had noted the instruction without comment. She thought it was the kind of thing that shouldn't require saying, but she had said it anyway. Royce called her somewhere over Tennessee. How do you feel? Royce asked. This was unusual. Royce did not typically ask about feelings. Fine, Octavia said. Honestly, fine. The Harrington attorneys sent a letter. Informal, not a filing. They're suggesting that the timing of the board review raises questions about your intentions relative to the divorce proceedings. They can suggest whatever they want. I know. I'm telling you, because I want you to know they're going to try to reframe this. Let them. Octavia looked out the window at the cloud cover below. The timeline is documented. The financial irregularities in regional development are documented. The board made their own decision. I didn't make it for them. Correct. I just wanted to check in. I know, Octavia said. Thank you, Royce. She ended the call and leaned her head back against the seat and let herself be still for a few minutes. She had not cried about any of this. She thought she might, eventually, in private, for the marriage that had been real, even if it had been built on a silence that had grown too wide. She had loved Westley. Or she had loved who she had thought he was, which wasn't the same thing as who he had turned out to be. That was a loss. She was going to let it be a loss. She was also going to be fine. She had known that for a long time, even in the hard years, even in the dinners where Lenora hadn't asked her a single question, even in the mornings when Westley had left for work without looking at her. She had known it the way she had always known things. Not loudly, not with fanfare, just quietly. At the center of herself, where no one else had ever been given access, she had built everything she had from a starting point that the Harrington family would have dismissed as insufficient. She had done it without their knowledge, without their approval, without even their awareness. She had walked out of that house with her coat folded over her arm and her dignity fully intact, and she had not needed to say a single word. That had always been the point. The plane descended through the clouds into clear air, and the city came into view below, ordered and sprawling, and full of people who were building things and losing things and starting over, and Octavia looked at it without sentimentality, without bitterness, with something that was closer to patience. She had work to do. She always had work to do, and she had long since learned that the work was enough, not as a substitute for everything else, not as a wall she hid behind, but as a genuine answer to the question of what she was doing here. She was building something. She had always been building something. And no one, not Lenora Harrington, not Gordon Harrington, not Westley Harrington, with his carefully prepared envelope and his relieved expression when she didn't cry, no one had ever had the power to stop her. They had just never known that until now.